Greetings to everyone. Welcome back once again to my educational channel on biology. We are going to continue to discuss subtopic 2.3 in the Form 4 biology syllabus. The title is Living Processes in Multicellular Organisms. So we have started off by discussing some specialized animal cells. Let's go on to discuss some specialized plant cells. For example, xylem vessels that are found in the stem and leaves of plants. So these cells are very specialized. They are like hollow cylindrical tubes that run from the root right to the stem and then to the leaves to transport water and mineral salts in their cells. So what are the adaptations of these cells? And what are these bands that are found on the surface of the xylem vessels? Let's find out more about the adaptations of the different plant cells. The learning standards for this lesson are as follows. Firstly, we should be able to correlate the uniqueness of specialized cell structures with their functions in multicellular organisms. In other words, how is a cell adapted to carry out its function well? How is it suited to carry out its function well? And secondly, identify specialized cells in multicellular organisms. So we're going to talk about specialized plant cells in this video. Now, the third and fourth objective or learning standard will be discussed in another video. So we are going to study some specialized plant cells, and these cells are found in the leaf. So let's have a look at the leaf structure. All right. Now, you cut through the leaf to get a cross section of the leaf. You will find that it has a few layers of cells. The first one, of course, is the epidermis, okay, the layer that covers the surface of the leaf. And this upper epidermis has a layer of cuticle, waxy cuticle on it, right? Then lower down, we have the Palisade mesophyll cells that carry out photosynthesis, and they are packed tightly together. Then we have the Spongy mesophyll cells, which can also carry out photosynthesis, but they are loosely arranged. And then we have the xylem tissues that contain xylem vessels to transport water. We have the phloem tissues that contain the sieve tube element to transport organic food substances. And lower down, we have the lower epidermis, which contains gut cells. All right. Of course, at the top, on the upper epidermis, there may be also gut cells, but maybe fewer in number. So we're going to discuss the Palisade mesophyll cell and its adaptations, Spongy mesophyll cell, xylem vessel, sieve tube element, gut cell, and also root hair cell, which is found in the root. Now let's start off by discussing a cell that is very important to produce organic food substances for the plant. And this is the Palisade mesophyll cell. Okay, so this name is quite long. We have to memorize it because it's an important cell that is tested quite often in the exam. Palisade mesophyll cell. Now, what is the structure of this cell and what is its function? So, firstly, the function. A Palisade mesophyll cell carries out photosynthesis to synthesize organic food substances for the plant. Okay, so here in the leaf, the cross section of the leaf, the Palisade mesophyll cells are located just below the epidermis, below the upper epidermis. Okay, so they are able to absorb sunlight that comes in from the top and carry out photosynthesis to produce the organic food substances needed by the plant for growth. So what are its adaptations? Now, as the main cell that carries out photosynthesis, it must be in great numbers, right? So they are long cylindrical cells. These Palisade mesophyll cells are long cylindrical cells. Here they are shown as long rectangular cells, and they are arranged vertically, okay, side by side, and close to each other. They are packed very tightly together so that there's no space in between them, so that more of these Palisade mesophyll cells can be crammed at the top part of the leaf. All right? And what is the reason for that? To allow maximum absorption of sunlight from the top, right? For the process of photosynthesis, to produce more organic food substances. So the more of these cells that the leaf has, then the faster the rate, the faster the photosynthesis occurs, and more organic food substances will be produced. All right, so it's packed very tightly together. Now, this cell also contains a lot of chloroplasts. This is the second adaptation. So we can see all these green chloroplasts inside the cell. So the chloroplast is an organelle, as shown here, that contains the green pigment called chlorophyll that can absorb sunlight for photosynthesis. So the chloroplast, since this cell has a lot of chloroplast, it will have high chlorophyll density. For what reason? Again, for maximum absorption of sunlight for the process of photosynthesis. Here is a beautiful picture of the cross-section of a real leaf. At the top, we can see the epidermis, the uppermost layer here, that doesn't carry out photosynthesis. And below there, you can see the Palisade mesophyll cells that we are discussing, right? So if you observe the leaf, you can see that it has how many layers of cells for Palisade mesophyll cells? 2 layers, right? Then also you can see a lot of dots inside here. These are the chloroplasts. And from here, you can see the arrangement of the Palisade mesophyll cells are very tightly packed together. That's the arrangement of Palisade mesophyll cells, packed closely together so that there are more of these cells to absorb more sunlight for photosynthesis and increase the production of organic food substances. Now, in contrast, let's look at another type of cell below, which has a different shape, and also the arrangement is different. So these are the spongy mesophyll cells. They are rounded in shape compared to the Palisade mesophyll cells that are cylindrical and packed closely together. But the spongy mesophyll cells are different because they are loosely arranged and there are many air spaces in between them. That's why they're called spongy cells, spongy mesophyll cells, because a sponge has a lot of holes in it, right? So it has a lot of large air spaces in between here. So what's the reason for this difference in arrangement between the spongy mesophyll cells and the Palisade mesophyll cells? Let's find out. So let's discuss the second type of plant cell, spongy mesophyll cell. In terms of function, the spongy mesophyll cell also carries out photosynthesis like the Palisade mesophyll cell to synthesize organic food substances for the plant. But its adaptations are different. Let's look at the first one. In terms of the arrangement of the spongy mesophyll cells, okay, now all these are spongy mesophyll cells. They are loosely arranged with large air spaces in between here. To create the large air spaces, they are loosely arranged. And what is the reason for that? To allow quick diffusion of an exchange of gases like carbon dioxide from the inside of the leaves here to the Palisade mesophyll cells. So these air spaces are actually needed to help the carbon dioxide diffuse through them quickly to the Palisade mesophyll cells above the spongy mesophyll cells, so that the Palisade mesophyll cells can carry out photosynthesis at a fast rate, at a high rate, okay, at a high rate. Now the equation for photosynthesis is very easy to remember. Just remember wet go. W for water, E for energy, which is light energy, C for carbon dioxide, G for glucose, O for oxygen. So carbon dioxide is needed in photosynthesis. Thus, the air spaces are created to allow the quick diffusion of carbon dioxide from the environment then to the inside of the leaf, and then to the Palisade mesophyll cells. Secondly, the second adaptation of a spongy mesophyll cell is that it contains a lot of chloroplasts to absorb more sunlight for photosynthesis. So it also has chloroplasts, the green structures here, to carry out photosynthesis. But it is not the main cell that carries out photosynthesis. All right, the chloroplast is at the highest density in the Palisade mesophyll cells. So now coming back to our diagram of the leaf, we just have a look again at the spongy mesophyll cells that are loosely arranged in order to create the air spaces, to form the air spaces and allow the quick diffusion of gases like carbon dioxide from the inside of the leaf up to the Palisade mesophyll cells to be used in the process of photosynthesis. The gut cell. So what is the function of a gut cell? A gut cell controls the opening and closing of a stoma. And what is a stoma? A stoma is an opening or pore that allows the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the environment and the leaf cells. So the plural form of stoma is stomata. So let's look at the picture of the leaf here. Now on the upper epidermis and the lower epidermis, there are tiny openings to allow gases to move in and out, diffuse in and out of the leaf. For example, during photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is needed for photosynthesis, so it diffuses into the leaf through the stoma, and then it will diffuse to the Palisade mesophyll cells, right? On the other hand, if there's a lot of oxygen produced, there's excess oxygen, then the oxygen can diffuse out through the stoma also. Now, water can also diffuse out through transpiration, through the stoma, diffuse out the leaf through the stoma. Okay, so what is the adaptation of the gut cell that controls the opening of the stoma? So each stoma has a pair of gut cells surrounding it that can control the opening and closing of the stoma. So when the gut cell is exposed to sunlight, it will automatically and slowly open the stoma. But in the dark, it will close the stoma. So it's very wonderful that it has this mechanism to open and close the stoma. So what are the adaptations of the gut cells? Let's have a look. Now, a gut cell is a modified lower epidermal cell with a thicker cell wall on the inner side, or a thicker inner cell wall, okay? And a thinner cell wall on the outer side, a thinner outer cell wall, okay? So this adaptation helps it to bend outwards more than bending inwards, because the thicker, less elastic inner wall prevents the movement of the wall towards the stoma, right? So more of bending will occur on the thinner elastic outer wall. It will bend outwards in the light, when it's in the light, to open the stoma. Now, the mechanism of the opening and closing of the stoma will be studied in Form 5. But let me give you a brief idea to help you understand. So the gut cells are very special. They have a lot of chloroplasts compared to other epidermal cells that don't have chloroplasts. Okay, so when they are exposed to light, like sunlight, they will open the stoma. How does it happen? First of all, in sunlight, the chloroplasts will carry out photosynthesis. Okay, and then a lot of glucose is produced. So the concentration of glucose and other dissolved substances increases inside the gut cells. This will cause water to diffuse into the cells by osmosis. You'll study that in about this process of osmosis in chapter 3. So water will diffuse into the gut cells by osmosis and cause the cell to become turgid and full of water. So this water is stored in the vacuole, and the vacuole will expand. So it will press on the thinner, more elastic outer wall and the thicker, less elastic inner wall, both ways. But the thinner elastic outer wall will stretch more, will bend more, curve more out this way, because the thicker, less elastic inner wall is thick, and it prevents the wall from moving inwards. Okay, So when the gut cells are turgid and full of water, they will curve outwards. This arrow here, outwards. And this gut cell will also curve outwards on this side. And the stoma will open. So the adaptation of the thicker, less elastic inner wall and the thinner, more elastic outer wall is important to help the stoma to be opened by the gut cells. Now, if you're not sure of the mechanism of opening and closing of the stoma, it's okay. You just memorize this adaptation, all right, for the time being. Okay, now this diagram shows you an open stoma, and this one is a closed stoma, right? It's because the size of the stoma is controlled by the two gut cells, all right? And how much the outer thin wall here curves. If it curves more, then the stoma will open wider, okay? So it will curve more when there's more water inside the gut cells, right? So the mechanism of stomatal opening and closing of stoma will be discussed in Form 5, right? Now, so here we see a real photograph of real gut cells, and you can see the chloroplast inside circular structures here, all right? And here the stoma is seemingly open, all right? Because the gut cells are curved outwards. So here, actually, the diagram is showing you the gut cells opening and closing the stoma, okay? Now, you watch the movement of this dark line. When it moves outwards, it means that the stoma is opening, right? And then when it comes together, it means it's closing. Open, close, open, close, open, close, okay? So when it curves outwards, it's opening, and when it curves and moves inwards, it means it's closing, all right? And the stoma is here, right in the center here. Open, close. Now let's go on to root hair cell. So a root hair cell is a cell that's found on the epidermal layer of the root, the outermost layer. It helps in the absorption of water and mineral salts from the soil and environment. And what's the use of the root hairs? So the root hairs that project out from the root hair cell is to help increase the total surface area, okay, of the root hair cells, okay, total surface area of the plasma membrane for absorption of water and mineral salts from the soil. So if you ask to draw a root hair cell, this is what you can draw. Okay, now this is a seedling that has grown the root and then plus the tiny root hairs, okay, that project up. So actually one root hair comes from one root hair cell. It's a projection from the root hair cell and increases the surface area by this much for the faster absorption of water and mineral salts. Okay, you can add the word faster absorption of water and mineral salts from the soil. The larger the surface area of the root hair cell, the faster the absorption of water and mineral salts from the soil. Next, let us discuss xylem vessels. So xylem vessels are important cells in the plant because they help to transport water and mineral salts. Okay. Now, when we say the word xylem, we are referring to the tissue in the plant, not the cell. All right. So xylem, which is a complex tissue, consists of 4 types of cells: xylem vessels, tracheids, sclerenchymal fibers, and xylem parenchyma. Right? Now we are just going to concentrate on the xylem vessels, which is a type of cell in the xylem tissue. Right? So 2 main functions of xylem vessels, which are a type of cell in the xylem tissue, are to transport water and mineral salts from roots to other plant parts. Okay, so generally they don't have cytoplasm inside the cell. They have an empty, hollow space here in the cell. The cell is hollow to transport water efficiently through that. All right, no cytoplasm and also no end walls. Okay, at the top or bottom, so the water can flow from one xylem vessel to the next continuously. And then they have lignified cell walls. That means the cell wall has deposits of lignin. It's strengthened with lignin, which is a strong hard substance to provide mechanical support to the plant and also provide support to the xylem vessel so that it does not collapse. Okay, it does not bend over or fold over. All right, and then we can see here that xylem vessels are joined end to end to form a long continuous tube, a long hollow tube from the roots right to the leaves. Okay, so there are many of these tiny tubes, long tubes inside the tree or plant to transport the water up from the roots to the leaves. Okay, let's find out more about the adaptations of the xylem vessel. So let's look at the adaptations of the xylem vessels for their functions. Now this is a very common and popular question in the SPM. Explain adaptations of xylem vessels for their functions. 3 marks. Alright. So how are the xylem vessels adapted or suited to carry out their functions, which is to transport water and mineral salts and also to provide support to the plant, right? So this is the way we can write it. Firstly, xylem vessels are dead hollow cells without cytoplasm, as seen in this picture. The cytoplasm has disappeared and there is a hollow center here, all right, to transport water without obstruction from roots to leaves. Okay, so the water can flow very well without any obstruction like cytoplasm to block it, right? So this is how they are adapted to transport water without obstruction. And the center part where there's a hole here, this part is called the lumen. The hole is called the lumen. Now next, xylem vessels join together to form long hollow tubes without end walls. They don't have end walls. So we can see here that there's nothing to cover the top of or the bottom of each xylem vessel because the end wall has disappeared, right? So then they can be joined end to end to form long hollow tubes, which are very long, extending from the roots to the leaves. If it's for tall trees, then it's very long. The xylem vessels form long hollow tubes, okay, when they are joined together. Now, this will help to transport water and mineral salts continuously from the roots to the leaves, right? Now, lastly, the cell walls of xylem vessels are thickened with lignin, which is a hard, strong substance, so that the xylem vessel does not collapse. All right, if the xylem vessel collapses and folds over, then it cannot transport water anymore, right? And also, overall, the lignin will help to provide support to the plant, especially the woody trees. So the wood that we use to make furniture like chairs and tables, this wood actually contains a lot of lignin, okay? And wood is actually consists of the many xylem vessels and other cells that have lignin, okay? That's why the wood is so hard. All right. Now, one more point to note is sometimes the drawing of the xylem vessel is not like this one here, where there is a hollow, there's no end wall, where there are no end walls. Sometimes the xylem vessel may have an end wall, but it's perforated. That means it has many holes in it. Okay, so if you you find a structure like that, and then with a lignified cell wall, this is still a xylem vessel, another type of xylem vessel. Okay, but generally xylem vessels do not have end walls. Now we can say that they do not have end walls. All right, so that when they are joined end to end, they can transport water and mineral salts continuously from roots to leaves. Okay, so here we see the xylem vessels, the real ones. This is a photo graph of the magnified xylem vessels, okay, and as seen through a microscope, right? And you can see here it has a lot of lignin in these rings to strengthen and give support to the xylem vessels so that they do not collapse when they transport water. Okay, this is the hollow center inside the xylem vessels that are joined end to end. okay, forming a long continuous tube to transport water continuously from roots to other parts of the plant. Now this is the longitudinal section. Now this is the cross section, second one, right? So if you cut through a stem, not lengthwise, but cut through the cross section, you will be able to see the xylem vessels with the lignified cell walls here. And you can see the white parts here. This shows that there's nothing inside the xylem vessels, empty. All the cytoplasm has disappeared so that the water can be transported without obstruction from the roots to the other parts of the plant. So the hole in the center here is called the lumen. Lumen. Here again, we see the position of the xylem vessels. They're found after the vascular bundle in the inner part of the plant here. Okay, and you cut the cross section through the stem and you magnify the tissues. You can see the xylem vessels are all these empty cells here that are white in color, okay, to transport water. So the phloem is on the outer part of the vascular bundle, and the xylem is on the inner part of the vascular bundle. And this red line that separates the phloem and xylem, this red line is the vascular cambium. So let's go on to the final cell, the sieve tube element. Sieve tube element cell transports organic food materials from leaves to storage organs, fruits, and other parts. Okay, so sieve tubes are long cylindrical tubes like this. Okay, here, and they are also joined end to end like the xylem vessels. Okay, to transport organic food substances efficiently from leaves to roots to fruits, storage organs, and other plant parts. But for sieve tubes, they do have cytoplasm. Inside them, strands of cytoplasm that pass through the end walls of the sieve tubes. And the cytoplasm is continuous, okay, to the next cell and so forth. So this sieve tube does have end walls, which are called the sieve plates. But the sieve plates have pores for the cytoplasm to pass through, okay? Unlike xylem vessels that don't have any end walls. Okay, so the sieve tubes do have end walls, which are called the sieve plates with pores. To allow the cytoplasmic strands to pass through, because the cytoplasmic strands will transport the food substances in it. Okay, so when the cytoplasmic strands pass through from one sieve tube to another sieve tube cell, it will transport sucrose from one cell to the next. Okay, down this way. And then beside each sieve tube, there is a companion cell. Companion means like the kawan, right? Like the friend. So companion cell will provide the energy for the functioning of the sieve tube. So here's a drawing of a sieve tube cell or sieve tube element that you can draw into your notebook. Okay, and it's a good diagram. You can draw the cytoplasmic strands that transport organic food substances from one cell to another, from one sieve tube element or cell to another. And below here, you can see the sieve plate, right? With the pores on the sieve plate that allow the food to be transported by using the cytoplasmic strands that pass through the pores here in the sieve plate. Okay, and there's also another cell called the companion cell, which helps to provide energy for the transport of food in the sieve tube. This cell we'll discuss later on in another topic, probably in Form 5 topic. Okay, but companion cell is also one of the cells found in the phloem tissue. So in this photo, we see the sieve tube. Okay, this is the longitudinal section of the stem, and you can see the sieve tube with cytoplasm in it, the greenish part. And here on top here, we can see some the sieve plate. You can see the sort of pores in the sieve plate. All right, to allow the organic food substances to be transported from one cell to the other. Okay. So this diagram gives us an idea, the location of the xylem vessels and the sieve tubes inside the stem. All right. So we'll be discussing the vascular bundles shown here later on, or in Form 5 topic. Okay, but just to show you the cells here, the specialized cells. These are the xylem vessels, right, without the end walls and joined end to end. Then there's the cambium here, all right, xylem, cambium, and finally the orange part is the phloem, right? So you can see the sieve plate here with the pores to allow the transport of organic food substances, okay, through the sieve tube. Now let's try a soalan ramalan. State 3 structural differences between a xylem vessel and a sieve tube element. So highlight the key words here, 3 structural differences, meaning differences from the aspect of the structure only, not the function, all right? And then the two cells we are comparing are xylem vessel and sieve tube element. Okay, you can pause the video for a while and try and think up 3 structural differences. And you can draw a table to show the differences, right? Now, if table is not drawn in the structured question, you cannot draw your own table. If the structured question just give you some lines to write the answer, then you have to write it down in words. But for essay question, you can use a table. You can draw a table and show the differences. Write down the differences in the table. Okay, let's look at the answer. Okay, the first difference is xylem vessel does not contain any cytoplasm. It's a dead cell. Sieve tube element is a living cell that contains cytoplasm. Okay, so the keyword is cytoplasm. Secondly, xylem vessels have lignified cell walls. That means the walls are strengthened with lignin. But sieve tube elements do not have lignified cell walls. Okay, they don't have lignin in their cell walls. Thirdly, it does not have end walls. Now here at the top here and the bottom, it doesn't have end walls. But for sieve tube elements, the end walls are present here. Okay, these two. And the end walls are actually the sieve plates. Okay, which have pores in them to allow the cytoplasmic strands to pass through them. So 1 mark for each difference. That's how we get 3 marks. Now this is the question that was posed to you last week, right? It was given to you. Diagram below shows 3 types of specialized cells X, Y, and Z. Identify the cells X, Y, and Z, and then explain how these cells are well adapted to carry out their functions. 10 marks, right? Okay, how are we going to answer this question? Let's learn the technique. First of all, we should have a rough idea of how many marks it is for each section. When you identify the cells X, Y, and Z, you may already get 3 marks already. Okay, or if the examiner is more miserly, or if the question is designed in such a way, it could be just 1 mark for everything. All 3 must be correct. But normally, 1 cell, 1 mark. Then explain how these cells are well adapted to carry out the functions. So it's adaptation question. So remember to state the characteristic followed by the function. Okay, so let's look at the answer. So we know X is a red blood cell, right? Y is a sperm cell. And Z is a nerve cell or neuron. So here's the answer. First of all, X is a red blood cell or erythrocyte. Y is a sperm cell and Z is a nerve cell or neuron. Now, neuron is spelled with E at the end here. That's the British spelling. So 1 mark for each name of the cell, correct name of the cell. And then we still have 7 marks. Okay, and we have to talk about 7 adaptations of the different cells. Total 7 adaptations. First one, let's talk about X, which is the red blood cell. So the adaptations of X for its function are as follows. Firstly, it does not have a nucleus to contain more hemoglobin to bind with more oxygen and transport the oxygen to the cells, right? So we have the fact or the characteristic, it does not have a nucleus, and the reason or the function to contain more hemoglobin in the space there where there is no nucleus, so that the hemoglobin will bind with more oxygen to transport the oxygen to the cells. Okay. Okay, secondly, X has a biconcave disc shape, is small in size but numerous. What's the reason? To increase the total surface area for faster diffusion of oxygen to the cell. Okay, the common mistake here is that students don't write the total surface area, or they miss out for faster diffusion of oxygen. So you have to have the 2 points here. Total surface area is increased, and this leads to faster diffusion of oxygen into its cells. Okay, the third adaptation. X has a flexible elastic plasma membrane so they can change shape and squeeze into tiny blood capillaries. Please take note that all these words in red and highlighted words, they are all the keywords. You don't have the keywords, you may not get the mark. That mark for the question. Okay. So adaptations of X is really 3 marks. Let's go on to the other side. So let's go on to Y. The adaptations of Y for its function are as follows. It has a long tail to help it swim towards the ovum in the fallopian tube for fertilization. Okay, so this is the sperm cell. Long tail to help it swim towards the ovum in the fallopian tube for fertilization. Notice that I gave a very complete answer to make sure that I get my marks. Now, Y has a lot of mitochondria. For what? To generate energy through respiration. For Y to swim to the ovum in the fallopian tube for fertilization. So the sperm needs a lot of energy to travel on its long journey to fuse with the ovum. Then the head of Y carries a set of chromosomes from the male parent, which contains genetic information to determine the characteristics of the offspring. Okay, so there are 3 adaptations for Y. And don't miss out Z, okay? If you miss out Z, you won't get the full marks because there's allocation for Z. There are marks allocated for Z. Okay, so give at least 1. So Z has a long axon and is thin in shape to transmit nerve impulses efficiently throughout the body. Okay. All right, that's all for this lesson. Please share, like, and subscribe to my channel. So till we meet again, goodbye for now, and thanks for watching.